Hello my friends, today we're gonna make a huge and melodic future bounce drop similar to Mike Williams and FL Studio 20. Let's start by making some nice chords. Now we'll chop them up and create the rhythm for the drop. Let's copy and paste them into a part 2, and let's change the fourth chord from this to this in the second part. Damn, I really like that second last chord. It creates this nostalgic and mysterious vibe. Now that we're satisfied with the chords, we'll make a nice melody on top. Sweet. Now my lovely people, we can start on creating a fat drop. We'll begin by creating a f***ing huge lead. Let's start off with this synth one layer playing the lead melody. Now let's add some more layers to fill out the lead. Our main goal when making this style of drop is to make the lead as big and airy as possible. When we have a nice sounding lead with a nice texture, we're gonna add some mixing effects to make it a lot more powerful. Let's start with a reverb. When we add the reverb first and add compression afterwards, the reverb will actually be compressed and therefore sound huge. The second thing we'll add is an EQ, then compression with OTT, some compression and distortion with Camel Crusher, a second EQ, distortion with Fruity Fast Dist, EQ, Soundjadizer, and a final EQ. This, my friends, is what the lead sounds like without the mixing. And this is with. Now let's make a volume automation for the lead to make it sound more bouncy and controlled. Let's also make a reverb automation to control the reverb. We need to fill in this little gap at the end of the melody, so I added these vocal shots from my Future House sample pack, link in the description. I also controlled the reverb on the vocal shots with this reverb automation. Now my good men, we will create a fat bassline, but first, I would truly appreciate it if you subscribed and turned on post notifications. Alright guys, let's start with this serum layer playing the bassline. Now let's add some more powerful layers to make the bass sound full. Let's also add the stab sound, which only plays some of the notes from the bass line in order to highlight parts of the melody and bring more energy. Now guys, let's add some nice mixing effects to make the bass line as powerful as possible. We'll start off by mixing the mid bass. I started off with some EQ, then compression and distortion with Camel Crusher, a second EQ, OTT, distortion with Fruity Fast Dist, EQ, Soundjadizer, and a final EQ. This is what the mid bass sounds like without the mixing. And this is with. Now let's quickly beef up the sub bass. We'll take it from this to this. To achieve that, we'll add a lot of distortion, OTT, Soundjadizer, and an EQ removing the low end. This, my friends, is what the full bass sounds like without the mixing effects. And this is with the mixing. Let's also add a pitch automation for the bass to make it more interesting. Now let's create some nice chords guys. We'll start with this serum layer. Then we'll add a couple more layers. Our goal with the mixing is to make the chords really wide and big while still sounding kinda soft and airy. The point of the chords is to make the bass and lead sound fuller and fatter. We'll start with an EQ, then compression with OTT, distortion with fruity fast dist, a camel crusher, EQ, sound jedizer, a third EQ, and lastly a fruity stereo shaper which makes them wider. This is what the chords sound like without the mixing effects. And this is with. This is what the chords and bass sound like together. They sound good, but let's add some cool things on top to make the drop more interesting. We'll start by adding this Mike Williams style chord fill. I just used the Synth 1 preset and wrote down this melody. Now let's add some harmonies on top of the bass and chords. It consists of a simple saw layer playing these notes while being controlled by this cutoff automation. Lastly, I added some stadium claps to add energy to certain parts of the bassline. This is what it sounded like before, guys. And this is after we added the extra stuff. Doing small stuff like this can make a huge difference and make your drops less empty. Empty drops was by far my biggest mistake earlier in my production journey, so hopefully this inspires you to just play around with some cool tricks. Now guys, let's quickly add some nice drums and effects. Let's start by creating a tight drum pattern. Now let's add some percussion sounds that complement the bassline and melody. Now let's add some nice fills and effects to glue the drop together. Alright guys, that was all of the elements of the drop, but before I show you the result, I would sincerely appreciate it if you went and checked out the sample pack. The link is in the description. Alright boys, here we go. If you liked the video, please be sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Love you guys.